Most salespeople lose the deal before they ever open their mouth, and they lose it for a reason they will never suspect. They lose it because the client can feel within seconds that the conversation is not about them. It is about you. Your quota, your commission, your anxiety, your need to close. And here is what nobody in sales training will tell you plainly. The client's brain is designed, literally, neurologically designed to detect that. You cannot fake your way past it. You cannot technique your way around it. The moment your intention is "I need this deal," your voice changes, your micro-expressions shift, your questions become leading instead of listening, and the person sitting across from you, whether they can articulate it or not, feels unsafe. That feeling of being unsafe kills more deals than bad pricing, bad timing, or bad products combined. So let me walk you through the single most important mindset shift in the entire profession of selling, and I want to be clear. This is not just for people who carry a sales title. If you are a freelancer, a founder, a consultant, a job seeker, someone building a personal brand, you are selling. You are always selling. You are selling your competence, your reliability, your perspective, your value. The question is whether you are doing it in a way that builds trust or burns it. Here is how most people understand sales. They think selling is persuasion. They think the job is to take someone who does not want to buy and make them want to buy. They study closing techniques. They memorize objection handling scripts. They learn how to create urgency. And all of this is built on one foundational assumption, that the salesperson's job is to move the client toward a decision the client would not otherwise make. This is wrong. And it is not just wrong in some moral or philosophical sense. It is wrong strategically. It is wrong neurologically. It is wrong commercially. Let me explain why. When you approach a conversation with the frame of "I need to persuade this person," you activate what psychologists call a self-oriented threat state. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for strategic thinking, empathy, and creative problem-solving, actually gets partially suppressed. Why? Because your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is reading the situation as high stakes for you. If I don't close this, I don't eat. If I don't close this, my manager is disappointed. If I don't close this, I'm a failure. That internal narrative is not just emotional noise. It literally changes how your brain operates. Under that kind of self-referential pressure, your working memory narrows. Your ability to read the other person's emotional cues drops. Your language becomes more rigid, more scripted, more rehearsed. And the person across from you picks up on all of it, not through logic, but through their mirror neuron system. Mirror neurons are the brain's social imitation circuitry. When you are anxious, the other person's brain begins to echo that anxiety. When you are relaxed and genuinely curious, the other person's brain begins to mirror that openness. This is not metaphor. This is measurable neuroscience. The quality of your internal state directly shapes the quality of the interaction. And no amount of scripting can override a nervous system that is broadcasting, "I need something from you." So the client pulls back. They give you polite resistance. They say, "Let me think about it." They ghost you after the follow-up, and you go home and think the problem was your pitch, your pricing, or your product. But the problem was never the pitch. The problem was the frame. Here is the shift. And I want to say this as clearly as I can, because it sounds simple, and it is not. The shift is from "I am here to close" to "I am here to help this person make a better decision, whether or not that decision includes me." Read that again. Whether or not that decision includes me. That is the line most salespeople cannot cross. Because crossing that line means giving up control. It means accepting that you might do everything right and still not get the deal. It means detaching your self-worth from the outcome, and that detachment is where real sales power begins. Now, I want to be precise here, because this is where people misunderstand. I am not saying you should not care about results. I am not saying you should be passive. I am not saying ambition is bad or that revenue does not matter. Of course it matters. You have bills, you have goals, you have a life to build. What I am saying is that when the desire for the result contaminates the process breaks. And when the process breaks, the results disappear anyway. This is exactly what Naval Ravikant means when he talks about the difference between status games and wealth games. Status games are zero-sum. For you to win, someone has to lose. Wealth games are positive-sum. You win by creating value that did not exist before. Most salespeople are playing a status game. They are trying to win the deal. The best salespeople are playing a wealth game. They are trying to create so much clarity and value in the conversation that the client's best decision becomes obvious, and often that obvious decision is to work with them. But not because they were pushed, because they were helped. Think about what this means structurally. When you shift from close the deal to help the person decide well, everything downstream changes. Your questions change. Instead of asking questions designed to funnel someone toward your product, you ask questions designed to genuinely understand their situation, even the parts of their situation that might disqualify them as a fit. Your listening changes. Instead of listening for objection triggers, you listen for the real problem beneath the stated problem. Your energy changes. Instead of performing confidence, you operate from actual calm, because the outcome is no longer a referendum on your worth as a human being. And here is the part that will either make you nod or make you uncomfortable. This shift makes you more money, not less, more, dramatically more, over time. Why? Because trust is the single highest leverage asset in any commercial relationship. And trust cannot be manufactured through technique. Trust is a biological response. It is generated when the other person's nervous system registers that you are safe, that you are competent, and that your interests are aligned with theirs. When all three of those signals land, the client's brain releases oxytocin, the neurochemical of bonding and cooperation, and their decision-making shifts from defensive evaluation to collaborative exploration. That is the moment when real deals get done, not because you pushed, because the resistance dissolved. Charlie Munger has a principle that most people quote but few people actually internalize. Show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. Munger uses this to analyze businesses and institutions, but it applies with equal force to individual behavior. If your incentive structure is close this deal today, your behavior will be short-term, aggressive, and trust-eroding. If your incentive structure is build a relationship that generates value over years, your behavior will be patient, curious, and trust-building. The outcomes of these two approaches are not slightly different, they are categorically different. One produces occasional wins and chronic churn, the other produces compounding returns, and compounding is the key word. Naval talks about this constantly. Compound interest is not just a financial concept. It applies to relationships, to reputation, to skill. Every interaction where you genuinely help someone, even if they do not buy, deposits a small amount of trust into an account that grows over time. That person remembers you. They refer you. They come back 2 years later when the timing is right. They mention your name in a room you are not in. This is how the best salespeople build careers that look effortless from the outside, but are actually the result of thousands of small deposits made over years. The Talmud has a principle that speaks directly to this. A deal must benefit both sides, or it is not a deal, it is an extraction. This is not sentiment. It is structural wisdom about the mechanics of sustainable exchange. If the client feels extracted from, you may get the transaction, but you lose the relationship. And in any sophisticated market, which is most markets now, the relationship is worth 10 times, 50 times, 100 times the single transaction. Now let me address something that I know some of you are thinking. You are thinking, that sounds great in theory, but my manager does not care about long-term relationships. My manager cares about this month's number. My commission structure rewards closing, not helping. The system I operate in does not support this shift. I hear you, and I am not going to pretend that structural incentives do not matter. They matter enormously. Munger is right, incentives drive behavior. But here is the thing, you are not powerless inside those structures. You still choose how you show up in each conversation. You still choose whether your questions are genuine or manipulative. You still choose whether you listen to understand or listen to respond. And over time, not overnight, but over time, the people who make those choices differently get different results, and those results give them leverage to reshape their environment. The salesperson who consistently builds trust gets better referrals, which means less cold outreach, which means a higher close rate, which means they hit their numbers with less effort, which means their manager gives them more autonomy, which means they can invest even more in the relationship-first approach. It is a virtuous cycle, but it takes patience to get the flywheel spinning, and patience requires something most sales training never teaches: emotional regulation. This is where the neuroscience goes deeper. Your ability to maintain this mindset, I am here to help, not to close, under pressure, under quota, under the stress of uncertainty, depends on your prefrontal cortex's ability to override your amygdala's panic signals. This is not willpower. Willpower is a terrible long-term strategy. It depletes. This is training. It is the same kind of training that athletes, surgeons, and military operators use to perform under stress. And the mechanism is well documented. When you repeatedly practice entering high-stakes conversations with a different internal posture, curiosity instead of need, service instead of extraction, you literally rewire the neural pathways that govern your stress response. This is called experience-dependent neuroplasticity. Your brain adapts to the demands you consistently place on it. If you consistently demand threat scanning and desperation, your brain gets better at threat scanning and desperation. If you consistently demand calm, curiosity, and genuine engagement, your brain gets better at calm, curiosity, and genuine engagement. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You are building the brain you use. The reticular activating system, the RAS, plays a critical role here. The RAS is the brain's filtering mechanism. It decides what information reaches your conscious awareness out of the millions of data points hitting your senses every second. When your dominant focus is, I need to close this deal, your RAS filters for closing signals, buying cues, moments of agreement, openings for your pitch. You stop seeing the full picture. You miss the hesitation in their voice that tells you they have an unspoken concern. You miss the offhand comment about a completely different problem that, if you addressed it, would make you indispensable. You miss the relationship because you are hunting the transaction. When your dominant focus shifts to, I want to understand this person's situation fully, your RAS recalibrates. You start noticing different things. You notice context. You notice subtext. You notice the thing behind the thing. And that is where the real value creation happens, not in delivering your pitch, but in seeing what the client cannot yet see about their own situation and helping them see it. This is what the MetLife LPTC framework was built around, even though most people who learn it miss the deeper point. The framework is not a sequence of steps to push someone toward a close. It is a structure for deepening understanding at each stage of the conversation. Each phase building rapport, identifying needs, presenting solutions, handling concerns is not a manipulation tactic. It is an opportunity to add value. When you understand that, the same framework that average salespeople use to push becomes, in your hands, a tool for genuine problem solving. The difference is not in the steps. The difference is in the intention behind the steps. Let me give you a concrete scenario to make this tangible. Imagine two financial advisors sitting down with the same prospect, a small business owner, mid-40s, doing well on revenue but anxious about the future. She has come in because she knows she needs some kind of financial plan, but she is not sure what. Advisor A is focused on closing. He listens to her situation, identifies that she is a good candidate for a comprehensive wealth management package, and begins presenting the solution. He addresses her objections efficiently. He creates urgency by noting market conditions. He asks for the commitment. She says she needs to think about it. He follows up 3 times over 2 weeks. She eventually stops responding. He marks her as lost in his CRM and moves on. Advisor B is focused on understanding. He listens to her situation and asks a question that Advisor A never asked. What is driving your anxiety about the future? Is it the business, your personal life, or something else? She pauses. She was not expecting that. She says honestly that she has been thinking about selling the business in 5 to 7 years, but she has no idea how to prepare for that financially or operationally. She has not told anyone this because she does not want her employees to panic. Now Advisor B has something Advisor A never had, the real problem. Not, I need a financial plan. The real problem. I am contemplating the biggest transition of my professional life, and I have no one to help me think through it. Advisor B does not pitch a product. He says, that is a significant decision, and there are financial, tax, and succession planning dimensions to it that we should map out before we talk about any specific products. Would it be useful if I put together a framework for how business owners in your situation typically approach this? She says yes, not because she was sold, because she was heard, because she was helped. Because for the first time, someone treated her as a whole person with a complex problem, not as a revenue target. That relationship will last years. It will generate referrals. It will compound. And it started because one advisor asked a different question. And the reason he asked a different question is that his brain was oriented toward understanding, not closing. Now, here is where I want to push this to a deeper level, because the shift I am describing is not just about sales technique. It is about identity. Most salespeople have an identity problem. They define themselves by their results. Good month, I am good. Bad month, I am bad. Close the deal, I am worthy. Lose the deal, I am a failure. This is psychologically devastating over time, and it is strategically suicidal because it makes every single conversation carry the weight of your self-concept. No conversation can bear that weight without distorting. The shift from I am here to close to I am here to help is, at its core, a shift in what you attach your identity to. Instead of attaching your identity to outcomes, which you cannot fully control, you attach it to your process, your presence, your quality of engagement. This is not a motivational trick. This is a fundamental restructuring of how your nervous system processes professional interactions. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states is relevant here. Flow, that state of deep, effortless engagement where performance peaks, does not happen when you are anxious about results. Flow happens when 3 conditions are met. The challenge matches your skill level, you have clear moment-to-moment goals, and you receive immediate feedback. Notice what is absent from that list: outcome anxiety. Flow requires you to be absorbed in the process, not fixated on the result. The best sales conversations feel like flow to both parties. The client feels heard. The salesperson feels engaged. Ideas emerge that neither party anticipated. Solutions take shape collaboratively. And at the end, the decision, whether it is yes or no or not yet, feels right to everyone. You cannot engineer that state through closing techniques. You can only access it by releasing the desperate grip on the outcome. This connects directly to what Csikszentmihalyi calls the autotelic personality, people who do things for the intrinsic satisfaction of doing them, rather than for external rewards. Autotelic salespeople sell because they genuinely find it fascinating to understand other people's problems and help solve them. The commission is a consequence, not the driver. And paradoxically, because they are not driven by the commission, they perform better, and the commission comes anyway. Let me talk about how you actually build this, because understanding the concept is not enough. Knowing is not the same as doing, and the gap between knowing and doing is where most people's growth dies. The first practice is what I call pre-conversation intention setting. Before every sales call, every meeting, every pitch, pause for 60 seconds and ask yourself one question. What does this person need from this conversation, regardless of what I need? That is it. 60 seconds. One question. This is not meditation. This is not woo-woo. This is a deliberate priming of your reticular activating system. You are telling your brain, before the conversation starts, what to filter for, and what you filter for determines what you find. The second practice is what deliberate practice research calls edge training, practicing at the boundary of your current ability. For most salespeople, the hardest skill is not pitching. It is not objection handling. It is listening without agenda, genuinely listening, listening to understand, not listening to respond. This is brutally hard because your brain is wired to plan its next statement while the other person is still talking. So practice this. In your next 3 conversations, sales or otherwise, make a rule that you will not respond for 2 full seconds after the other person finishes speaking. 2 seconds of silence. Let what they said actually land in your brain before you formulate a response. You will be stunned at how different the conversation feels. You will notice things you have been missing for years. The third practice is feedback architecture. Most salespeople get feedback on one thing: did the deal close or not? That is terrible feedback. It is too binary, too delayed, and too dependent on factors outside your control. You need to build feedback loops around the process, not just the outcome. After each conversation, ask yourself 3 questions. Did I understand their real problem, not just their stated problem? Did they feel heard, genuinely heard? Did I add value to their thinking, even if they do not buy? If you can answer yes to all 3, you had a successful conversation, regardless of whether it produced a transaction. Track these metrics. Over weeks and months, you will see patterns. You will see which types of conversations you handle well and which ones you struggle with. That is your training map. The fourth practice involves what Barbara Oakley, in her learning science research, calls interleaving, deliberately mixing different types of practice rather than drilling the same skill repetitively. Do not just practice discovery calls over and over. Practice discovery calls, then practice presentations, then practice difficult conversations where you have to tell a prospect that your solution is not the right fit for them. That last one, telling someone you are not the right fit, is the single most powerful trust-building move in all of selling, and almost no one practices it, because it feels like losing. But it is not losing, it is investing. The prospect you honestly disqualify today will refer you to 3 qualified prospects tomorrow, because you proved that your integrity is not for sale. The 5th practice is long-term relationship architecture. This goes beyond the individual sale. Create a system. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet, where you track every meaningful professional relationship, and you schedule touchpoints that have nothing to do with selling. Share an article that is relevant to their industry. Congratulate them on a milestone. Ask how the project is going that they mentioned 6 months ago. These micro-interactions compound. They build what Naval calls specific knowledge embedded in relationships, a form of capital that cannot be copied, cannot be automated, and appreciates over time. Let me push this one level further, because there is a dimension of this shift that almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one. When you adopt the mindset of "I am here to help, not to close," you do not just change how you sell. You change how you see yourself. You move from being a transaction facilitator to being a problem solver, a trusted advisor, a person whose presence in someone's business life makes that business life better. And that identity shift has cascading effects on every other area of your life. Because the skills you build in this mode, deep listening, emotional regulation, genuine curiosity, patience, long-term thinking, are not sales skills. They are life skills, they are relationship skills, they are leadership skills. The person who learns to listen without agenda in a sales conversation becomes a better partner, a better parent, a better friend. The person who learns to detach self-worth from outcomes becomes more resilient, more creative, more free. This is what I mean when I say that sales is not just a profession, it is a practice. It is a discipline for growing as a human being. The best salespeople I have ever studied or worked with are not just good at selling, they are good at people. They are good at understanding. They are good at creating value in every interaction, not just the ones with a dollar sign attached. And they got that way not through talent or personality, but through deliberate, sustained, unglamorous practice of the principles we just discussed. The Talmud says something that I think about often. Who is rich? He who is satisfied with his portion. In the context of sales, I interpret this as the salesperson who is satisfied with the value they create in each conversation, regardless of whether it converts, is the one who ultimately generates the most wealth. Not because satisfaction magically attracts money, but because satisfaction removes the desperation that repels trust, and trust is the engine of all sustainable commercial success. Munger would add, invert this. Instead of asking, how do I close more deals? Ask, what makes deals die? The answer, overwhelmingly, is broken trust. So the single most effective sales strategy is, do not break trust, do not manipulate, do not pressure. Do not pretend to care when you do not. Do not ask questions you do not want the honest answer to. Remove the things that kill trust, and trust fills the space naturally. This is inversion applied to selling, and it is devastatingly effective. Now I want to address one more misconception before I close, because it is a dangerous one. Some people here focus on helping, not closing, and they interpret it as do not ask for the business. That is not what I am saying. Asking for the business is not aggressive. It is honest. If you have genuinely listened, genuinely understood, genuinely added value, and genuinely believe your solution is the right fit, then not asking for the commitment is a disservice to the client. You are leaving them in decision limbo because you are afraid of rejection. That is not kindness. That is cowardice dressed up as politeness. The difference is this: when you come from a place of genuine service, asking for the business feels like a natural continuation of the conversation, not a predatory lunge. It sounds like, based on everything we've discussed, I believe this is the right path for you. Shall we move forward? That is direct, that is honest, that is clean. And the client respects it because it comes from confidence in the value you have created, not desperation for the revenue you need. There is a world of difference between a surgeon who says, based on my examination, I recommend this procedure, and a surgeon who says, I really need you to agree to this procedure because I have a boat payment due. The recommendation is the same. The energy is completely different. The trust impact is opposite. So here is what I want you to do this week. Not someday, this week. First, before your next 3 sales conversations, set a 60-second intention. Ask yourself what this person needs from the conversation, not what you need from it. Write it down if you have to. Second, in at least one conversation this week, practice the 2-second pause. Let the other person finish. Wait 2 full beats, then respond. Notice what changes. Third, after each conversation, score yourself on 3 dimensions: understanding their real problem, making them feel heard, adding value to their thinking. Track it. Build a simple record. Do not rely on your memory. Memory is biased toward protecting your ego. Fourth, identify one prospect or contact who is not currently a buyer and reach out to them this week with something genuinely useful, an article, an insight, a question about their business. No pitch, no agenda, just value. Plant a seed and do not dig it up to check if it is growing. Fifth, at the end of the week, sit down for 10 minutes and ask yourself honestly, not harshly, honestly, in how many of my conversations this week was I genuinely trying to help, And in how many was I performing helpfulness while secretly trying to close? Do not judge yourself for the honest answer, just notice. Awareness is the beginning of change. The shift from I need to close to I am here to help is not a soft shift. It is the hardest thing most salespeople will ever do, because it requires you to give up the illusion of control. It requires you to tolerate uncertainty. It requires you to find your professional identity in your process, not in your scoreboard. And it requires you to trust, genuinely trust, that creating value is the most reliable path to capturing value. That trust is not blind faith. It is backed by neuroscience, by behavioral economics, by compounding mathematics, and by the lived experience of every great salesperson, advisor, and entrepreneur who ever built something that lasted. The people who make this shift do not just sell more, they sell differently. They sell in a way that makes the client grateful, not relieved. They sell in a way that builds a career, not just a month. And they sell in a way that they can look at themselves in the mirror at the end of the day and know, not hope, know that they made someone's decision better. That is not a technique, that is a practice, and practices do not expire. If this made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it and leave a comment below. I read every one. Here is the question I want you to answer. When was the last time you lost a deal and realized, honestly, that the problem was not your product or your price, but your energy in the room?